Well, it doesn't taste great. It's not backed by the FDA, but it probably wouldn't hurt. If you go south from here on I-95, just over 3 hours, if you go past Jacksonville, turn off at around St. Augustine, you will find the Fountain of Youth. More accurately, Ponce de Leon's Fountain of Youth Archaeological Park. You will find that Fountain of Youth, as they call it there, and for a relatively reasonable rate, as far as anti-aging regimens go, about $22.95, I think admission runs for adults. It's free for kids 5 and under. For about that price, you can get admission. You can take a sip from the springs. In fact, in the gift shop, you can even buy a bottle for your family. You can mail it across the state, send it to some loved ones if they need just a little bit more vim and vigor. But you know, if Ponce de Leon's Fountain of Youth Archaeological Park, if that didn't make your list of top summer destinations, if you won't immediately go out and book an Airbnb to stay in St. Augustine this summer, I think we could all understand. We can understand because the water, it's not much of a secret. It doesn't actually do anything. It doesn't actually reverse aging. You know as well as I do that it's all just a fabrication. If you go back hundreds of years to Ponce de Leon, the Spanish explorer who landed in Florida and called it La Florida, the flowery place, he never wrote about any kind of fountain of youth. And if you go back a little bit more recent in time, you go back to the 1900s, it's there that you find that little location starting out. Entrepreneurial woman, she was a gold miner. She goes down, she buys a plot of land, markets it aggressively, and then charges for admission. Even the kindest Google reviews today will admit that the place is a little bit of a tourist trap, and they will note that the water actually tastes a little bit like rotten eggs. You could buy a koozie, you could buy a t-shirt, you could buy a postcard from the gift shop, but you just can't buy eternal life there. Kind of fascinating to me, but the thing that fascinates me isn't that the Fountain of Youth doesn't exist. The thing that fascinates me is that we kind of want it to, don't we? The thing that fascinates me is that so many people, we're still looking for something, that proverbial fountain of youth, something that will reverse the slow decline of age, something that will take away the fear of death, of getting just a little bit older every year. Still today, all across the world, people are touting this new cure, this new regimen that will actually make you a little bit more youthful, a little bit younger. Fact is, you and I, we all know that we need life. Fact is that because of sin, we'll all face death. So where is it? Where is it that we look? This morning, as we continue our Lenten journey, we're talking about water for the thirsty, and it's an apt metaphor, isn't it? Everybody needs water. Everything needs water. If you ever watch those survival shows, sure, you can start a fire and you can build a shelter, but you're going to need water sooner or later. You can maybe go for, 3 days without having water after that. Life is just about impossible. And so this morning, Jesus is talking about water. Talking about water to a woman at the well, the last person you think Jesus would be talking to, and yet, as we think about this conversation, as we dive deeper into it, we see the kind of gifts that Jesus wants to give. He talks about this water, and he is determined to give this woman exactly what she needs. And so this morning, we hear how Jesus gives water for the thirsty. Sermon this morning is taken from the Gospel of John chapter 4. Our story starts out at a well. And if you read the Bible, wells are pretty significant places. Significant, one, because wells have water, and water means life, especially in a place that's a whole lot drier than it is here in Bluffton. You really needed water, and so you needed wells. They were an essential part of everyday life. They didn't have plumbing. You needed that well. Also important because a lot of really interesting relationships and meetings, they happen at wells. You think of Jacob and Rachel. You think of Moses and Zipporah. You think of Isaac and Rebekah. All of these meetings, the relationships, they happen at wells. And so there's this familiar theme that comes about, and Jesus meets this woman here, and yet he's going to offer her, he's going to lead her to a different kind of relationship, give her a different kind of water, a different kind of life. Jesus has been traveling. He is headed down south from Galilee. And it says he had to go through Samaria. And so tired as he was from the journey, because he's not only God, he's also man, he stops at a well. Disciples have gone into the town to scrounge up some food for Jesus and for themselves. And so Jesus is alone and he's by this well. And because he doesn't have a bucket or rope or anything, he asks this woman, "Give me something to drink." It's a pretty simple request, but here's how the Samaritan woman responds. She says, "How is it that you ask me a drink? You're a Jew and I'm a Samaritan woman." It's a simple request, but it comes in a very complicated situation. To say that the Jews and the Samaritans did not get along, that would be gravely understating the matter. They were incredibly opposed to one another. In fact, that verse, I think it's verse 9, is talking about how they don't associate with one another. In the very literal reading, they don't even use the same vessels. It kind of reminds you of kind of a Jim Crow South era where you had separate water fountains, right? The Jews, they were so disgusted by the Samaritans that they wouldn't even use the same vessels. And now Jesus is asking her to drop this bucket down and give it to him? Are you sure? How can you even ask that? And yet Jesus is determined to speak with this woman, to give her what she needs. There are conventions that he is going against, and yet these are conventions that Jesus will gladly break for the sake of her soul. Tired as he was, he gets this drink, and more important than his physical thirst is her spiritual thirst. And so he goes on, and he flips it. He says, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." Now, there's kind of a double entendre there. If you're thinking about living water, maybe you think of water that comes from a stream. It's flowing water. All things equal, if you are going to get water, it's better from running water from a source that's flowing, that's moving. Rather get it from there than from a stagnant puddle or a pool. And so Jesus is talking about this living water, but it also has another sense. Living water is also water that can give life. This woman, though, she doesn't really seem to grasp what Jesus is talking about. And so she asks him, how are you going to get this? You don't have a bucket? You don't have a rope? Are you going to jump down there? Are you greater than Jacob? Jacob dug this well for us. How is it that you're going to get some flowing water from me? Jesus goes on. "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life." Woman responds, "Sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water." I don't know about you, I'm incredibly curious. I wonder what tone she said that with. Up to this point, she seems a little bit skeptical, a little bit puzzled by Jesus' offer of water. He doesn't have anything to get the water with. It's possible that at this point she's totally convinced, she's totally bought in. But I think it's also possible that maybe at this point she kind of sees Jesus as something of a charlatan. Is he really going to get me this water? And so maybe her response is simply one of kind of light cynicism. Sure, whatever it takes. If I can stop coming back to this well, I'll do it. Just give me the water and I'll drink it. You know, it's interesting. Some people make the point that she's going to this well at noon. It'd be a little bit like mowing your lawn at 1 p.m. You probably wouldn't do it in the middle of summer here. It's too hot. The point is sometimes made that maybe she goes out at noon because, as Jesus is about to reveal later, she's had kind of a messy past, and maybe she doesn't want to bump into everybody at the busy hour. Maybe that's why she doesn't want to keep going back to that well again and again and again. In any case, she kind of accepts the offer. Is it cynical? Is it sarcastic? It's hard to know. But she doesn't really seem to grasp what Jesus is really offering here. So finally, Jesus, he cuts to the banter and he says, "Go call your husband." He says, "I don't have a husband." Jesus says, "You're right about that. In fact, you've had 5, and the one you're with, he's not your husband." And just like that, he lays out the timeline of her life, cuts open her life, and he just lays it before her. John doesn't give us a comment as to what exactly happened to her husbands. Doesn't say if they died. Doesn't say if she ran away from all of them, if they divorced her. Doesn't really say what happened here. Probably most reasonably, most probably, it was some kind of mixture of brokenness and sin and all of the other factors that make life so ugly in this world. In fact, because she's living with this person that Jesus says isn't even your husband, she's not guiltless in this whole matter. And yet Jesus is determined to talk to this woman, determined to try to get a little bit farther with her rather than just this surface level banter. So lays out her life in front of her, and then, probably shocked a little bit, she says, "Sir, I see that you're a prophet." And then what does she do? Changes the topic. Maybe she's honestly asking for questions about where exactly to worship. Maybe she's honestly looking for a final answer in this, or is it possible she's just trying to change the topic away from that very sensitive, that very vulnerable part of her life, and maybe just bring it back into the realm of abstraction of these intellectual debates? Jesus cuts through that too, and then finally she says, well, when the Messiah comes, then everything will be clear. It's kind of a strange response, isn't it? It's a little bit like if you asked for directions from your spouse, and they say, well, you just go 0.2 miles and then you take a left. And then after that you say, well, Google Maps will make everything clear. Kind of seems like she's not totally on board quite yet. What do you make of that whole thread? What do you make of this conversation, this exchange? There's all sorts of things, all sorts of threads, all sorts of motifs we could jump on. We could talk just about water. We could talk just about the cultural factors involved here. We could talk about male and female. We could talk about worship. But, if you go to the core of it, what's Jesus really trying to do here? Jesus is trying to give this woman something she needs. Trying to give her not just a little bit more water, so that her life will just continue for another day in the same old manner, in the same old fashion. He's trying to give her living water. But, the interesting thing is, she seems kind of skeptical. Seems a little averse to Jesus' offer, doesn't she? It was interesting. I was reading a book, don't ask me why, a book about rabies. And for the most part, it's kind of eradicated here. The animals might have it, but it's exceedingly rare. The ancients actually called it hydrophobia, though, because something happens when someone contracts rabies. Their neck muscles will spasm, so much so that swallowing is impossible. And so you watch it. You can watch a video, and someone they will have a glass of water in their hand, and they will bring it to their lips, and then at the last moment, their arm will jerk away. The very thing that they need, they are averse to. In fact, in older accounts, it's even told about how someone who had rabies, they would grow fearful at even the sound of rushing water. Or maybe it's a little bit like this. There's another disorder that some people have called pica, where it comes from, doctors think, a nutrient deficiency, and yet what do? They eat things that are inedible, like paper, rocks, dirt, soap, hair. They eat all sorts of things because of this, and yet they're the very things that they don't need to eat, the very things that will only make the condition even worse, the things that won't actually give them more life. That's kind of what sin does, isn't it? Jesus has all of these blessings for us, this life, this water, this living water, this water that gives life, and he wants to give it to us, doesn't he? In word and sacrament, every Sunday, he wants to give it to us, and yet, what does sin do? It points us towards other things. It tells us that if you really want life, you can seek it elsewhere, and so often that's kind of how we think, isn't it? That if we really want life, well, how do we talk about life? We talk about living high on the hog, and maybe to really have the life that I deserve, to really have the life that I want, maybe it all just comes down to money. Or sometimes we talk about romance. That's kind of what that lady at the well, it seems like what she was doing, doesn't it? We talk about romance in such a way, you complete me. This is the final piece. Once I have this, then my life is really going to be complete. But it wasn't for that lady. We could talk about all sorts of things, the role of sports, of our kids, maybe trying to want to live through our kids, maybe it's success. There are all sorts of paths that we try to go down, and we try to find the life that we really crave there, and yet, like drinking salt water, it only makes us thirstier and thirstier, emptier and emptier. That woman at the well, it seems like she also struggled with skepticism. That could be true for us too. People talk about a post-truth culture. They talk about all the skepticism, the postmodernism, how, boy, it's hard to prove anything, so it just all comes down to your feelings, my feelings, your truth, my truth. What's your story? It's hard to have any kind of life like that. Hard to have any kind of hope if nothing really matters, if nothing really ever endures. So what's the solution? Is it just to follow all of those lesser desires? Is it all just to follow all of those lesser loves and hope that one day perhaps they can kind of give us the life that we want, and if not, that's just going to have to be good enough? No, the solution for that woman, just like it is for us, is to receive what Jesus gives and to see how determined he is to give it. There's an interesting word that John uses. In verse 4, it wasn't originally part of our reading, but I included it. It said he had to go through Samaria. Geographically, this is not true. There are other routes to go around Samaria. But every time that word, that he had to, he must, every time that word translated from the Greek, every time that word is used in John, it talks about divine necessity. That this is not something from logistical or physical necessity, but divine necessity. This is something that was on God's agenda. This is something that somehow played this greater role in this plan of salvation. And so when it says that Jesus, he had to go through Samaria, it means that Jesus had to see this woman. Maybe the last woman you think that Jesus should see, someone who wasn't a Jew, someone who wasn't a male, someone who didn't lead the kind of life, perhaps, that you would expect from a Jew. In fact, in their laws, they said 3 divorces, that's probably enough for anybody. And yet, who is it that Jesus had to see? He had to see this woman. And he had to talk to this woman, and as skeptical as she was, maybe she didn't seem all that interested in the water at first. As he talked to her, he would let nothing stop him. It wasn't who she was. It wasn't the kinds of things that she had done in her past. It wasn't the kind of guilt that she felt. No, Jesus, he had to talk to her. And finally, after he cuts through all of it, finally, what does he reveal to her? He says, I, the one speaking to you, I am he. That's the big reveal. Greater than a prophet, greater than Jacob. Here's the Messiah. And where did the Messiah go? Not only to his own people, but also to the people who were far off, the people who might not have included themselves in God's chosen people. God himself, in the person of Jesus, he goes to this woman. He knows every bit of her history. He knows everything that she might have wanted to keep secret. He knows every dark secret that actually the town probably knew about. He knew each and every moment of her life, every decision, and yet what did he do? He was determined to meet her. He wanted to meet her because he had gifts that she just had to get. There were truths that he just had to tell her. He wanted to give her this life that was greater than any life that she could have forged on her own. So the disciples come back, and he's talking to her, and then she does something strange. She leaves. She came with that little bucket of water, but then the bucket stays there. She goes back to her community. It's kind of interesting. You almost wonder, with her coming at noon, was she ostracized for her community? Nevertheless, because she knows Jesus, now her relationships are beginning to be restored, and she goes to this community, and she asks this question, could he be the Messiah? Could this guy, could he really be the real deal? He told me everything I've ever done in my life. That's a fascinating little conversation. She goes from skeptic to evangelist. Whatever was done in her past, it all just becomes a backdrop for God's grace. She came to get one kind of water, and now she left with a far better kind. What does all this mean for us? Sometimes we can be a little bit like that woman at the well, can't we? We can be looking for life, and we can be going to all the wrong places. We can be going to the things in life that only sustain us for a little bit, the things that promise a lot but don't deliver quite so much. And sometimes we can actually turn away from God, and our different pursuits of these things, we can kind of fall away, we can stray for a while, but the solution for us too is a God who knows us. A God who knows every secret, every decision, every moment of our life, and yet doesn't walk away, but rather puts on his divine agenda to bless you, to come to you in word and sacrament, to come to you through someone who told you about Jesus, and to bring each and every blessing, to bring you life. We should probably talk about life a little bit. When Jesus is talking about life, he's not just talking about a little bit more of the same. He's not talking about a drug that gives you 3 more months with loved ones. He's not talking about the same old life that's broken like you and I, we know so well on earth. Nor is he only promising this kind of emotional hit, this kind of rose garden of life where everything is therapeutic, where all of your feelings are aligned, where you're never ever going to have a trouble again. If you look at Jesus' life, if you look at the life of the disciples, it was not always easy. It was not always about emotional fulfillment. Rather, it was even better than that. a kind of life with an identity that was unshakable, a kind of life with a resurrection that was guaranteed, a kind of life that doesn't end, life that doesn't leave you thirsty, life that doesn't leave you looking for more. That's the kind of life that you have in Jesus. You think all throughout the Bible, there's all sorts of images for water, all sorts of washings and cleansings. Even in Exodus 17, we heard about how God gives water even to people when it looked like there really was no water to give. That's what He'll continue to do for you as you go back to your baptism, as you lean on Him for provision. He will give you everything you need in life, not only physically, but also spiritually. About once a year, I go down to St. Augustine. We have a conference down there, a pastor and teacher conference down a little bit south of there in Palm Coast. One of these days I might stop into the Fountain of Youth. Might try the water, probably will taste like rotten eggs. Maybe I'll buy a bottle of it for family. But I have no illusions. I know that that's not going to make me more youthful. I know there's no turning back the clock at this point. But that's okay. Because you and I, we know where life comes from. It comes from Jesus. Comes from those living waters, and you know how through Him He will make those living waters bubble up into a spring that leads to eternal life. God grant it. Amen.